Welcome, and this week as we're getting closer to Easter we look at Mark Wallinger's sculpture Ecce Homo, which was executed in 1999, and I do think that the year of execution here is important because 99 of course is at the brink of the millennium, and we see a lot of contemporary artists sort of asking these bigger questions in life, and where also the dates come from, 2000 years after Christ. Who was Christ? And so it's a very interesting time for art history at the cusp of the new millennium. So who was Mark Wallinger? He was born in 1959 and he's a leading figure in contemporary British art. And he won a wonderful accolade in 2007 by winning the Turner Prize. And of course artists before such as Damien Hirst, Anthony Gormley, Howard Hodgkin had won the prize. And so it's just a wonderful achievement to win the Turner Prize. And he won it with a highly political work which was called State Britain, which was the recreation of a protest camp set up by a peace campaigner in Parliament Square. And that's really typical for Wallinger's work, because his work is always very politically engaged. As he says himself, he says art is about the politics of representation and the representation of politics. So this work here is a rather unexpected subject for the artist. And Wallinger describes himself as a former atheist, now agnostic, and in general he's quite reluctant to talk about his own beliefs. So looking closer at the sculpture, we can say that easily that it's a groundbreaking interpretation of a well-known motif in Christian iconography. And actually, talking about Christian iconography, the Ecce Homo theme was not used in Christian art until the 9th or the 10th century onwards. So early Christians did not really sort of use this theme. But then of course from the 10th century onwards we see all these sort of an advent of artists using this theme for their composition. So we have Hieronymus Bosch in the 15th century using the theme, Caravaggio in the early 17th centuries, etc., etc. So Ecce Homo literally means behold the man. It is a Latin form of the words that Pontius Pilate said when he handed Jesus to the crowd after the flagellation and the crowning of thorns, and just before the crucifixion. So what Mark Wallinger does here is representing Christ as a modern man. As he himself said, I wanted to represent Christ just as a guy being handed over to the lynch mob. And I think that says it all really. And again, the way he depicts Christ is quite unusual. So Christ is beardless, his head is shaved, he has a cloth around his hips which looks more like a towel than an actual loincloth, which we see in more traditional representations. And then furthermore we see Christ with his hands tied behind his back, and he's wearing that crown of gilded barbed wire. So of course the crown of thorns is represented there, but also the fact that it's barbed wire which is gilded is that wonderful tension between the horrible barbed wire, but then also the gilding, which already represents a certain element of redemption and the resurrection to come. In our previous videos, we don't always look at who commissioned an artwork or where the artwork was originally hung or installed, but I think here it is actually of crucial importance to understand this particular artwork. We see Wallinger creating this figure of a lone man, a lonely Christ standing before a hostile crowd and awaiting judgment. And the scene, of course, is particularly poignant and suited for Trafalgar Square and its associations with crowds and public demonstrations. And for those of you who haven't visited London or who are not familiar with Trafalgar Square, basically there are 4 plinths on Trafalgar Square, and the first 3 plinths hold statues of King George IV and 2 of his generals. And then the 4th plinth, even though it was built in 1841, it was meant to hold the statue of King William IV, but funds, they basically ran out of money. And so there was never a sculpture on that plinth until in the 1990s, the Royal Society for the Encouragement of Arts decided to commission a work on a regular basis from various different contemporary artists. And I think it's important because you see the sculpture here as being a life-sized Christ standing on this huge massive plinth, and of course it makes Christ look absolutely minuscule against this huge plinth and against the skies, but nevertheless it has an incredible presence on the whole square. And commentators even at the time said that it made all the other statues in the square looked hopelessly pompous. It was quite a remarkable installation, and even the Catholic Archbishop of Westminster, Cardinal Vincent Nichols, described the sculpture as being humbling and affecting for all the people who were on the square. So thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.